Thank you to Drew the Stew for this Patreon raffle video. If you too would like your idea for a Media Mementos video to come to life, stay tuned to the end of the video and I'll tell you how. Elf. I mean, what more can I say? To many, including myself, it's one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time. It's got comedy, it's got heart, it's got the guy from The Godfather.
Get out of my life! Now!
What more could you want?
Ow! Son of a nutcracker!
Many people on and offline have talked about why Elf is fantastic, but no one's really talked about how this thing came to be. Until now. Gather round, everybody, as I tell you the complete history of Elf. Elf originally started production in the prehistoric year of 1993. It was a spec script written by David Brennenbaum, and it was largely based off of his fascination with the Christmas specials he watched growing up. The story was about a young man raised by Christmas elves in the North Pole, realizing that, in fact, he's a human and not an elf. So he ventures out to modern-day New York City to find his family, and hijinks ensue.
It's me, your son.
But unlike the elf that we know today, the original version of the script was considerably darker in tone. Instead of Buddy the Elf going to New York City and lighting up everybody's life with Christmas cheer, it was a screwball black comedy to its core. Eventually, Jim Carrey was given the lead role, and Elf began production, until it didn't. The film quickly ran out of money and studios were not exactly interested in a dark elf comedy, so many of the people involved decided to move on, including Jim Carrey, who felt that the film possibly would never get made. And even if it did somehow get produced, it wouldn't be worth waiting around for, so he decided to call it quits and move on to bigger and better things. Will Ferrell, who at the time was a somewhat unknown but still well-liked comedian thanks to his time on SNL, was given the lead role instead. But even so, production couldn't continue. All revenue had dried up, and since the film was having a difficult time gaining attention from studios and investors, the producers felt that it was time to rewrite the film from scratch. Luckily, they found the right person to do it. Ultimate Fighting Champion, Jon Favreau. Favreau knew Will Ferrell's manager, so he was kind of a friend of a friend, so to speak. And when the producers of Elf offered him to direct, Favreau said no. He didn't like the way the script looked because it was so dark and mean. But he did like the prospect of being a director for a Will Ferrell film, so he struck a deal with the producers. If Favreau was the one who would write the script, he would be able to come on as director. So he spent the next year rewriting Elf from a dark, sinister comedy, transforming it into a more positive and upbeat film. There was heavy inspiration from Rankin Bass specials for this, not just in terms of what was planned for the visuals, but also in tone. The world that Buddy would grow up in would be heavily inspired by the world seen in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or The Year Without a Santa Claus. Bright, colorful, and always chipper, just like the main character himself. While there were several specific elements that were changed in the script, the overall story would stay the same, with similar plot beats and character dynamics. But in the end, the script was almost unrecognizable from what came before. One of the most notable examples was that at the end of the movie, Buddy, Santa Claus, and Walter Hobbs have a chase scene with the New York Rangers. Not those Rangers. There we go. But it was originally much grander in scale. The cops were gonna chase Buddy down, they were gonna jump off the Empire State Building onto a helicopter, but it got a little too chaotic, and Favreau wanted to keep the slice of life style that he'd envisioned. After all, according to him,
Christmas movies are about spirit winning out over cynicism. It's a nice part of the message of the film that you find in a lot of Christmas movies.
And something like that just wouldn't fit. New Line Cinema took interest in this movie and decided to greenlight it, which kind of surprised the producers. New Line Cinema was surprisingly cool with the concept of a Christmas comedy starring a B-list actor at best, and not to mention one that had a pretty small budget. Now, of course, it wasn't minuscule like something such as Meet the Feebles, but it wasn't this big spending movie that you normally see around the holidays. Nevertheless, New Line Cinema had faith in the film and let the producers do basically whatever they wanted. At least for a while, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Granted, it did take some convincing to get them there, but hey, they got with the program eventually, and I guess that's all that matters. When the crew was scouting out potential shooting locations, they noticed that there was this dark, gloomy cloud hanging over New York City. 9/11 wasn't too long ago, so nobody was exactly in the Christmas spirit. Seeing a bunch of people scouting areas and pointing things out, it gave off the impression that these people were here for some kind of ground zero analysis or anti-terrorist inspection, and when they learned the real motives as to why the crew was there, it didn't help all that much. People weren't sure what to make of this movie, so the crew decided that one of their missions for ELF would be to reclaim Manhattan, using their silly Christmas movie to help them feel happy again during this holiday season. One of the most interesting stories involves the crew going to Macy's asking if they could shoot there for the department store scenes, and Macy's said yes, but only if they removed the scene where Buddy the Elf has the fight with the fake Santa. The reason being is that Macy's has a Santa come to their stores every year, so they didn't want to imply that this Santa was their Santa and ruin the fun for the kids. Favreau thought long and hard about this, but eventually decided to turn them down. Instead, they shot in an abandoned mental institution in Vancouver, using the name of the now defunct Macy's rival, Gimbels. With the locations firmly decided, it was time to pick the cast. For Walter Hobbs, Buddy's dad, somebody serious and stern, but also someone who could roll with Will Ferrell's comedic punches was required. Favreau approached James Caan, and sure enough, he accepted. Zooey Deschanel was given the role of Jovi, Buddy the Elf's girlfriend, but at the time of casting, Favreau didn't know that she was a singer.
I didn't know you were singing.
But once he found out, he made several changes to the script in order to include her talents. Some of them were added relatively last minute, like the Baby It's Cold Outside scene, which, on Will Ferrell's part, was mostly improvised. Wanda Sykes was originally going to play the role of the store manager, but unfortunately, she backed out last minute.
I am sick of your
So last minute, in fact, that they couldn't adjust the name tag or the costume to fit somebody else.
Why are you smiling like that?
Oh, and also the Christmas Story star, Peter Billingsley, has a cameo in this. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
He did an unbilled cameo here from me. He's a producing partner of mine. He was a co-producer on Made, the first film I directed.
Even though Will Ferrell knew the script pretty well, there would be several moments that were tailor-made to get an authentic reaction from him so that the Buddy the Elf character would seem more real. One of the biggest examples was the Jack-in-the-Box testing scene, where Buddy has to check for defective toys, each one being programmed by Jon Favreau, where off-camera, he would push a button on a remote, causing the Jack-in-the-Box to pop up. So yeah, that part where Will Ferrell gets scared at the end, that's real. New Line Cinema originally wanted heavy CGI to be used throughout the film, but Favreau fought hard to use stop motion and forced perspective. Forced perspective in particular was one of Favreau's passions, since he'd seen Lord of the Rings pull that off not too long ago. For the most part, everybody had a good time during production, but some people weren't all too happy. One of the biggest groups that wasn't happy were the people of New York City. Because Will Ferrell was prancing around in an elf costume doing strange things and making a lot of noise, nobody knew what to make of him and were generally put off. Especially when he was walking through the Lincoln Tunnel, where he may or may not have caused some traffic accidents. Another person who was having a difficult time on set was Will Ferrell.
I'm a cotton-headed ninny muggins.
There are allegations, mostly made by Caan, that he and Jon Favreau didn't exactly get along. We're not sure what specific things they fought over. Maybe it was creative differences or overall personality conflicts. But what we are sure of is that Will Ferrell got pretty sick at the end of filming. Eating all that junk food had finally caught up with him. James Caan was also having a difficult time on set. He felt that Will Ferrell was too over the top and too cheery. He also wasn't taking too kindly to Will Ferrell's practical jokes. One day, Ferrell gave Caan a wrapped gift with a note on it reading, "Great working with you. The first one's a little bit slow, but the second two are really good." Yep, you guessed it. Will Ferrell gave James Caan a wrapped copy of the Godfather trilogy, which Caan was famous for starring in, and this rubbed him the wrong way. Luckily, Caan didn't walk off the set or quit the project entirely. Instead, he just decided to bear with the jokes and keep on going. Eventually, he saw some of the footage and/or a rough cut of the film, the details vary by account, and he realized that they were making something magical. And from then on, his spirits were raised. Good thing James Caan liked the footage because New Line well, they were having some second thoughts. They wanted this movie to be darker and edgier, you know, the exact things that Jon Favreau didn't want. They kept insisting that things should be reshot with a sinister tone, especially the ending scene, which they weren't all too fond of. They also wanted the practical effects to be replaced with CGI, but luckily, Favreau stood his ground. Elf was either going to be made his way or no way at all. Things got even more difficult when the lawyers came to town. See, they didn't like that Elf was making fun of Rankin Bass, or rather, straight up using their designs and models. So every single day when they had to shoot scenes in the North Pole, the crew would have to appease the lawyers who were breathing down their neck. Luckily, they eventually went away, but there was always the threat of reshooting all the scenes they did in New York, or getting slammed with a lawsuit. Luckily, neither of those happened, but with lawyers, you can't be too careful.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Now, with all that being said, Elf was still a fun film to make.
Best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear.
There were inside jokes, camaraderie amongst the cast, and Favreau did whatever he could to treat the actors well. Even if, again, he and Will Ferrell had their differences, he still tried to be the best director he could. It was a lot like what happened with the production of Flintstones 1994, where sure, there were some mishaps and some unhappy days, but overall, the crew was trying whatever they could to make this a positive experience. The point of this movie was to defeat cynicism, not create it. Production wrapped up with the mailroom scene, which had been taken out and put back into the film so many times that nobody's been able to keep track. Some days it would be in the movie because it added a lot to Buddy's character and the story, and then other days it would be taken out because it didn't add to the character or story, but eventually Favreau decided to keep it in, and personally speaking, I'd say it's for the best.
This scene had been written and rewritten up until the very last day.
Elf was released November 7th, 2003, and much to everybody's surprise, it was a gigantic hit. Even those who expected it to do well never expected it to do this well. Critics adored it, it made well over its budget, and it went toe-to-toe with the box office with Matrix Reloaded. And sure enough, in the coming years, that hasn't changed. Elf has now become a Christmas classic. And in regards to the film's continuing success, Favreau had this to say: "Our goal, even then, was to make a movie that could be part of that pantheon. The fact that it's in the rotation is the highest honor that movie can have." Once Elf was a hit, there were talks of making a sequel, but it never panned out. New Line Cinema kept pitching all these ideas for what new adventures Buddy could get into, but Favreau and Will Ferrell never felt that any of them were right. In later years, Favreau would warm up to the concept of a sequel, but Ferrell would not. Especially now, when Will Ferrell's saying that he would feel really self-conscious about wearing those tights again. And unfortunately, with the death of James Caan, a sequel is probably never gonna happen now. But that's okay, there's still tons more Elf stuff to go around. In 2010, a full Broadway musical was made based on the movie, and much like the film itself, people adored it. So naturally, combining the success of the movie and the Broadway musical would create something even bigger, right? Well, not exactly. An animated children/family-oriented adaptation was released in 2014, and though the critics liked it, most audiences considered it unnecessary since it's basically just the first film again, toned down, and with songs from the musical. The last bit of new Elf content we've received came in 2020. Here, most of the cast reunited on Zoom as a bit of a reunion special, so to speak, in order to raise money for the Georgia Democratic Party, who was looking to help fund the campaigns of Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in the upcoming Senate runoffs the next year. And that's pretty much it. That there, my friends, is the story of Elf. Turns out one of the movies that was trying its hardest to fight the dark energy throughout the country was having a hard time fighting it off itself. Luckily, that never showed up on screen. Whenever I want to feel happy during the holidays, I usually want to put on Elf. It always puts a smile on my face, and judging by what the internet has to say, I'm not alone.
The best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear.
Now I wonder what Christmas movie we're going to be covering next year. Maybe I'll have to think about that when I go on vacation again. Because I certainly don't want to wait till Christmas to decide. Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? What about this production did you know already, and what did you learn for the first time? Comment below and let me know, because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. And now it's time to thank our wonderful Patreon people, starting with our Masters of Fate. Chan 11, Drew the Stew, Elisamir Rogers Archer, Kev Messick, Platinum Bass, Quiet Chap, Ryan Williams, Timey, and Woody Woo. And now our executive producers, Albert Robinson, Blackjack, H.R. Huffman, Indiscreet One, Leaf Storm, Ravioli Supremo, Unkale, and who else but Zane. If you too would like your name read at the end of every Media Mementos video, then why not consider donating to the Patreon? There's a fancy little link in the description below for you to check out. And if you want to get more involved in the Media Mementos fan community, there's a link to the channel's Discord server as well. Feel free to stop on by and say hello. Alright folks, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, that's the big question. Is this real gum? And it is. It's real gum.